Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Emily Beanie, Chief Curator of the Legion of Honor, and Barbara Wolf, Curator in charge of European Paintings. And today, it's my true delight to introduce Dr. Furio Rinaldi, who is Curator in charge of the Achenbach Center for the Graphic Arts here at the Fine Arts Museums. In just a moment, we'll hear from him about discoveries in the museum's master drawings collection. And here's the moment where I remind you that his lecture is 8th in a monthly series we're mounting here at the Legion to celebrate our permanent collections throughout this centennial year. We continue to celebrate the museum's 100th birthday. So do come back on the second Saturday of each month at 1 p.m. to hear about the treasures in our jewel box. Before proceeding, I will share our institutional land acknowledgement. The Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco occupy unceded land of the Ramaytush Ohlone, who are the original inhabitants of what is now the San Francisco Peninsula. The Greater Bay Area is also the ancestral territory of other Ohlone peoples, as well as the Miwok, Yakuts, and Patwin. We acknowledge, recognize, and honor the indigenous ancestors, elders, and descendants whose nations and communities have lived in the Bay Area over many generations and continue to do so today. We respect the enduring relationships that exist between indigenous peoples and their homelands. We are committed to partnering with indigenous communities to raise awareness of their legacy and to engage with the history of the region, the impacts of genocide, the dynamics of settler colonialism that persist. Lincoln Park, where the Legion of Honor was founded in 1924, operated as city cemetery from 1868 until 1898. When the park was created, many of the burials were relocated, but the majority were not. Please join the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco in honoring the memory of the thousands of individuals still buried in this land. So, Dr. Furio Rinaldi is a specialist in Italian Renaissance drawings and curator in charge of prints and drawings here at the Fine Arts Museums, where he has spearheaded numerous acquisitions and exhibition projects over the last 5 years. In 2022, as many of you will remember, he organized the first exhibition ever devoted to the drawings of Sandro Botticelli, presented here at the Legion of Honor. Its catalog, rich in new research and attributional information, was named the year's best art book by the New York Times art critic Jason Farago. His other exhibition projects have included Color into Line, Pastels from the Renaissance to the Present, and the first North American retrospective of Tamara de Lempicka, presented last year at the de Young. He holds a PhD from La Sapienza, the University of Rome, and before joining the Fine Arts Museums, served in various capacities at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and in the Old Master Drawings Department at Christie's. He was the recipient of a 2022 Tobey Fellowship at Villa I Tatti, the Harvard Center for Italian Renaissance Studies, and his many publications include an article that secured the attribution of a rediscovered drawing to Michelangelo. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Rinaldi to the podium.
Thank you, Emily, for the very kind introduction. Thanks to all of you for being here. It's such a beautiful day in San Francisco, so I appreciate that you decide to spend the Saturday afternoon with us for this lecture series. And I want to specifically thank Emily, who kind of designed and shepherded this lecture series to completion for the Legion Centennial. Emily and I arrived almost at the same time at the museums, and we both felt that there was a great need and certainly appetite for a lecture series that was kind of foregrounded on our permanent collection and on the scholarship of the curators. And so thank you, Emily, for really bringing all of us together in this fantastic program for this year. I am truly delighted to be here and thrilled, in fact, to present you for the first time some new research pertaining the Old Master Drawings collection here at the Fine Arts Museums. The research is the result of the cataloging efforts that were carried out on the collection since I joined the department 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago, mamma mia. So I wish to thank all the colleagues, of course, that across the museum and beyond made significant contributions to the outcome of the research that I will present today. the works that I'm going to discuss today all belong to the Achenbach Foundation for Graphic Arts, which is, as you know, as many of you may know, is a department of works on paper here at the Fine Arts Museums. At more than 100,000 works on paper, prints, drawings, illustrated books, and photographs, it is the largest collection of the museum and is the largest collection of works of art on paper in Western United States. So this is an immense collection that requires the constant care, attention, and stewardship of a number of colleagues, not just curators, but paper conservators, registrars, art handlers, technicians. We do all of our framing and matting in-house. So all wonderful professionals whose contribution is essential to the preservation and the survival of these extremely fragile artworks. So this is the opportunity to shed a light on their work. You see some of them featured here. And also, I specifically want to call out the very important role that the Graphic Arts Council, our department support group, has in the support of our programming and some of our acquisitions. So I know many of you are here today, so thank you so much for being with us for the last 50 years, in fact. However large the collection is, only a portion of our holdings can be visible at any given time at the Legion of Honor and at the Young Museums. Due to their fragility and light sensitivity, works on paper shall always be dimly lit, and their exposure cannot exceed the limit of 50 lux, which is a measure of illuminance. So most of our collection of works on paper rests safely in our storage boxes, out of light exposure, and can only be periodically displayed in exhibitions that cannot exceed sometimes a very, very limited number of weeks. Consequently, it is through exhibitions, publications, and also our online content that the collection is known, studied, and understood. Prints, drawings, and photographs are constantly and periodically on view, both at the Legion of Honor, of course, and the Young Museums, and included in our permanent collection installations, as well as special exhibitions that you can see here. Just a sample of the few exhibitions dedicated to works on paper in the last few years. Works of the collection, from the collection, are also always accessible and available to scholars, students, as well as all of you members from the community, as our department, the Achenbach, opens weekly every Thursday to anyone who wishes to see drawings and works on paper from our vault. So I invite you all, if you're interested, to come visit us at the Achenbach and really enjoy the experience of being in direct touch with a work of art on paper. It is a privilege, really, that everybody can afford and everybody should afford. And it is wonderful to see you in the department, so please come visit us. Unlike the works, the famous works that we have seen, some very icons sometimes of the Legion of Honor that my colleagues have discussed in the previous iteration from this lecture series, the drawings and the works that I'm going to illustrate today may be less familiar to many of you. The group of works that has been the primary focus of my research belong, and to the presentation of today, of course, belong to the foundational donation of about 300 old master drawings gifted to the city and county of San Francisco in 1948 by local collectors Moore and Hazel Achenbach, whom you see here, after whom our department was named, of course. So for today's lecture, I will present to you a brief profile of our founders, Moore and Hazel Achenbach, and how they came to acquire their drawings, specifically highlighting new evidence on the drawing's provenance. Then I will proceed to discuss more in detail some of the most interesting sheets from this group, focusing on the style, attribution, and which role each of these work played within the artist's design process. So using our collection of Italian old master drawings as a through line, This talk will allow us to understand the central role that played by drawing in the broader development of artistic creativity in early modern Europe, as well as to grasp some significant changes, technical as well as stylistical and functional, that occurred in the field of drawings between 16th and 17th century. So let's start with Moore Schultz Achenbach, who was born in Schuylkill Haven, Pennsylvania in 1878. He attended a local business school there, and in 1898 he enrolled at the Pennsylvania Academy, where he took night classes from Thomas Anschutz and William Mary Chase. He studied Rembrandt prints as part of his education there, and in 1898 bought his first print, which we still have at the collection, of course. Is an etching by the French 19th century printmaker Maxime Lalanne. An early member of the Philadelphia Print Club, which had just been founded in 1915, Achenbach started experimenting with drawing himself. And I show you here a couple of his early drawings from about 1900. We have many others from that are in the collection, of course, and show his interest as well as his experimentation in different techniques. At some point, he realized that he was never going to be a great artist, and so he decided to pursue a career in the emerging field of professional advertising as a creative director. One of his first jobs was at the H.J. Heinz Co. in Pittsburgh, where he specialized in food product, in advertisement of food product, in the company where the most successful product was the tomato ketchup, of course. There in Pittsburgh, he met and married Hazel Jacobs in 1905. The couple first traveled to Chicago and then to New York, where Achenbach worked at McCann, another advertising company. And in 1918, he was named head of the Pacific Coast Advertising and moved to San Francisco with Hazel. Two of his largest accounts here were Del Monte and Dole Foods. And I illustrate here an advertisement from 1918 from Del Monte, which features, of course, an illustration by Norman Rockwell, which was produced under Achenbach's creative direction. And I quite don't understand this advertisement, so maybe some of you can explain it to me. So he clearly opened the can, but I don't get it. But I'm sure it's fun. In San Francisco, the Achenbachs moved to a large home in Buchanan Street, 2618 Buchanan, to be precise, the attic of which was quickly turned into a private print room for their really increasing works on paper collection. One of the earliest curators of the Achenbach Foundation, Gunther Trocki, said that the Achenbach really enjoyed having visitors at their home, and they were never tired of showing prints in their attic, which for print lovers was kind of legendary in San Francisco. Moore Achenbach called his attic, I quote, "a heaven of peace, quiet, and serenity, where there was no pressure and no problems, just prints. And prints don't talk back." End of quote. In this archival photo in the Achenbach Foundation, you can also see the couple's ingenious rack system, not exactly at today's conservation standards, of course. And also each of their print purchases was diligently recorded in a ledger book. And each print was also stamped with the collector stamp, which he designed, and you can see it in the upper right. By 1948, when Achenbach retired officially from McCann, the balance of the collection consisted of 25,000 prints, about 1,000 drawings, and about 2,500 books. He said that he spent approximately $8,000 a year on his collection, which is not a small amount considering that prints and drawings at the time costed as much as $1 to $5. So it was a big commitment, financial commitment. His salary when he retired was $18,000 a year. The average salary in America was about $3,000, but nonetheless, it was a big commitment for him. It is important to understand the nature of the Achenbach's kind of collecting efforts. Moore Achenbach collected prints mostly for relaxation, as a kind of a hobby. He was not a connoisseur. So he rarely sought out those fine or very important prints. His ambition was very broad and more encyclopedic. I quote, "The character of the collection is definitely historical," he said in 1948, at the time of the donation. It has representative examples of all printmakers of all time. It is a working collection that at some point touches every human development during the past 500 years, unquote. So in order to cover his vast field as methodically as he set out to do, Achenbach was obliged to restrain in his purchases of so-called master prints. So those precious rarities vied for by connoisseurs. However, this does not mean that the collection lacks such highlights. In 1938, you can see here, the couple was able to purchase a really fine impression of Dürer's haunting Melancholia #1, which is considered a pinnacle of German Renaissance printmaking. Achenbach named Dürer, as well as Rembrandt, among his favorite artists. And indeed, his holdings of each of these artists in the collection far exceed a representative example. The couple's greatest pride were the Rembrandts. Of the 303 known etchings by the Dutch master, Achenbach owned 140 of them. Highlights of this Rembrandt collection include the excellent impression of the Great Jewish Bride and a woman bathing. And as you remember from a beautiful exhibition that we did here called Rembrandt Century, most of our Rembrandt collection was on display about 10 years ago. It is very important to highlight Hazel Achenbach's contribution to the collection, particularly in its 20th century holdings. Mrs. Achenbach was an enthusiastic supporter of new American printmaking enterprises, specifically the efforts of June Wayne in LA. She was the founder, of course, of Tamarind Lithography Workshop in Los Angeles, and we owe to Hazel Achenbach the early acquisition in the 60s of some of June Wayne's earliest works. So that's really an interesting topic that maybe we can explore for a future lecture. As I said, the couple was delighted to share their holdings, and as Moore approached retirement, he expressed the couple intention to give the collection to an educational or an art institution, preferably a library. By June 1948, Achenbach entered in negotiation with the San Francisco Public Library, and in September, he outlined his terms that designed the Achenbach Foundation for Graphic Arts as, I quote, "a gift to the city and county of San Francisco and a living cultural asset to the citizens of this community." And I emphasize the word living because together with the collection, also Moore and Hazel Achenbach established an endowment for future acquisition, which still is in place, and it was a very generous endowment back then, and we still draw from that every year for some of our most important acquisitions. So they were very ahead of their time. The Achenbach gift was saluted by the local museums, but also by the San Francisco Chronicle as, I quote, "one of the greatest art gifts ever donated to an art institution in this city, and one of the finest things that have ever happened to San Francisco," unquote. As the collection had outgrown the space that was allocated at the public library, for practical reasons, the agreement was revised to relocate the collection within the California Palace of the Legion of Honor, where it was moved officially in 1950. The resolution was ratified in December, and Mr. Achenbach was instantly made an honorary trustee of the museum. Irene Ligorio was named the first director of the Achenbach Foundation. The inaugural exhibition at the Legion, February 1951, was a selection of 20th century prints called Tempo of the Times. Mr. Achenbach enjoyed taking tours himself, guiding visitors through the periodical installation of the collection. So the choice of the Legion, which we are celebrating, of course, this year in its centennial, the choice of the Legion as the new home for the Achenbach Foundation seemed an appropriate one. By that time, both the Legion and the de Young were, in fact, already collecting works on paper and drawings specifically. Lloyd LaPage Rollins, who in the 30s was the first joint director of the de Young and the Legion of Honor, was passionate about works on paper and acquired several during his short tenure as a director. In 1932, at auction, he purchased this beautiful funerary design for a tomb of a bishop as a work by Parmigianino. This drawing is instead by a striking, beautiful early drawing by Perino del Vaga, a pupil of Raphael. I would say one of his most gifted pupils in terms of in his talent for drawings. The drawing has been with us since 1932, but was completely unknown to scholars. And I recently flagged it to Linda Wolk-Simon, a scholar, Italian Renaissance scholar in New York, who is about to publish it very soon for its importance. And I think it's going to identify also who the sitter is and for whom the monument was made. So not just acquisitions from the staff or the directors, but local collectors also enriched our holdings of works on paper before and after the Achenbach gift was made. Prentice Cobb Hale donated this exquisite bust-length pastel of the goddess Diana drawn by the renowned Venetian artist Rosalba Carriera. At the time where this was gifted, it was possibly the first firmly attributed work by a European woman artist to join our holdings. So while the acquisition and exhibition of prints seemed a priority to the identity of the Achenbach Foundation in the early years, by these dates, the collection also included many drawings. Achenbach's singular and most remarkable acquisition in the field was done in 1938 with the purchase of a cache of about 300 old master drawings, mostly from the Italian school, 16th and 17th centuries. The collection was originally assembled by Joseph Green Cogswell, a trustee and first superintendent of the Astor Library in New York, who acquired it in Naples during one of his trips to Europe in the early 19th century. The Cogswell collection was acquired and passed the hands of the American banker Mortimer Schiff, from whose estate Achenbach acquired it en bloc. So this is the sequence: Cogswell, Schiff, and then Achenbach in 1938. The collection, which is really the focus of today's talk, comprised a number of academic drawings by Italian artists from the 16th and 17th centuries, many with challenging attributions and nebulous provenance, as until now, we really didn't know where the collection was before Cogswell acquired it. The collection remained very much under the radar since it joined the museum, and drawings from this group were seldom exhibited or published, and known only to few scholars who were able to study them here in San Francisco. So because of all these challenges, it was really an irresistible research project for me when I joined the museum. The number and variety of drawings included in this collection attest to the development of form and function of the medium. The medium had undergone in Italy through the mid of the Cinquecento, the 16th century, to the early Seicento, the 17th century. Several rough sketches, as you can see here, often drawn in pen and brown ink, show how artists continue to adopt drawings to block out their visual ideas as they were developing in their mind. Oops, okay. It's rich. Thank you. And I can take it from here, Rich. I think. There you go. Once on paper, artists used drawing to fine-tune the anatomy of their figures with great accuracy, exploring complex figural solution and adjusting lights and shadows. For its warm color that mimics the flesh tones, from the mid-16th century and throughout the 17th century and onward, red chalk became the favored medium to depict the human body and the canonical medium to explore the naked male body in the emerging art academies throughout Europe. The study of drapery, another invention from the earlier Renaissance, became more and more important in the following century as a means to suggest the shape of the body underneath and to emphasize its sculptural and monumental appearance. While we are used today to appreciating drawings as single sheets of paper, most of them framed and matted on the wall, most of them were originally bound in sketchbooks, of which they constituted the leaves. So among the many surprising discoveries was to find here an entire set of figure drawings drawn by the 16th century Florentine draftsman Maso da Sanfriano, a pupil of Vasari, drawn with figures drawn in black chalk on paper prepared with salmon pink wash. This is just a sample of the sheets. There are several more. These drawings were originally part of a pocket-sized sketchbook that the artist carried with himself and used to record developing ideas of moments from everyday life. Functioning as a repertory, sort of a stock of figural invention, such sketchbooks would be constantly consulted by the artist as a source of inspiration for their paintings or sculptures or any other artistic endeavor. The example provided by classical antiquity represents an enduring source of inspiration for Italian draftsmen at the threshold of Renaissance and Baroque. Antiquity is copied, used, and reinvented for a variety of purposes and applications, from architecture to decorative arts. And we'll focus in detail on some of these drawings in a bit. Like Roman antiquities, the public work executed by the champions of the High Renaissance, Michelangelo and Raphael above everyone, were revered and copied, offering the young generation of developing draftsmen an example upon which to measure their talent. And we have here a drawing attributed to Federico Zuccari, based upon Raphael's fresco in the Vatican Lodge. Towards the end of the 16th century and the 17th century, we also see the rise of new genre of drawings, like caricatures and landscape drawings, the latter of which occupies a larger role within the classical trends of Baroque painting. Once all of these singular figural elements were defined, the body, the anatomy, the drapery, the expression, the artist would prepare a compositional drawing, which features the scene as a whole in preparation of the painting or the artistic endeavor to be executed. When a fresco or an altarpiece was particularly large or monumental, the compositional drawing would be squared off in a proportional grid for the design to be precisely transferred onto the larger surface to be painted. And this is exactly what happened to this highly finished study for the martyrdom of St. Peter and Paul, which I have attributed to the late Baroque painter Giacomo Triga, which the artist used to paint the really monumental altarpiece that still anchors the choir of the Basilica in Rome at St. Peter and Paul at the Celio. So this is just a sample of the Italian drawings in the collection. It was never, though, fully clarified how and when Moore Achenbach acquired this collection from the Cogswell collection. This is a crucial passage that kind of, I obsessed over, and that now, finally, we can place firmly at June 24, 1938, when the entire collection estate, in fact, of Mortimer Schiff, who at the time owned the collection, was auctioned off in London by Christie's, Manson and Woods, which is the first company of the modern-day Christie's. So I was able to retrieve the auction catalog of the sale, which precisely describes how the drawings were presented during the auction. While the drawings today in San Francisco are preserved as single sheets, as we saw, with each work mounted separately, at the 1938 auction, the drawings were assembled into 19 albums. I quote from the catalog's description, "whole bound in red Morocco and tooled with gold." And keep this description in mind because this will allow us to link the drawings in San Francisco to a much more prestigious provenance that we will show in a moment. Of the 19 albums put at auction, 15 were containing drawings by miscellaneous Italian 16th and 17th century draftsmen like Giovanni Balducci, Giordano, Baglione, and Ribera, which are all featured in our collection, as we will see. As the catalog notes, the first two albums of Italian drawings were estimated £3 each, but were acquired for £168, which is about $20,000 in today's currency. As also noted in the catalog, the lots were acquired by certain Spencer. You see the name Spencer written down, which I believe was possibly the art dealer, the intermediary art dealer that was acting on behalf of Moore Achenbach in London. Once in San Francisco in 1939, the red Moroccan leather albums were dismembered and the drawings removed from the album pages in order to be filed singularly in the Solander boxes, the storage boxes that we use. However, so this is how a drawing presents itself now. When I started reviewing these drawings, I noticed remnants of the distinctive and previously unidentified historic mount. By mount, I mean the supporting backing sheet onto which the original drawings are pasted, and which likely constituted the leaves of the original album pages. So again, while today we're used to appreciating the drawings, beautifully framed and matted, it is important to remember that until the 19th century, prints and drawings and photographs sometimes were always kept and preserved in albums. So these mounts that you can see here are characterized by a simple yet distinctive for us design, and the drawings are framed by one or two lines of brown ink. Many of the mounts in the Achenbach drawings also show the presence of an old inscription that clarifies the drawing's early attributions, identification, or connections to resulting paintings. The inscription on this mount correctly identifies this drawing as by the Roman late Mannerist painter Giovanni Baglione. And here, the inscription on this other drawing, a large drawing by the Baroque painter Pier Francesco Mola, reads Mola al Gesù, so correctly linking this dynamic pen and ink study to the preparation of Mola's spectacular fresco of the Conversion of Saul, frescoed in the Church of the Gesù in Rome in 1656. And this was Mola's, some of his most important public frescoes in Rome, the ones that really propelled his career in the Eternal City. So the person who wrote the inscription correctly linked the drawing to the final fresco. The inscriptions are sometimes written left on the drawing's mount, as we saw, but sometimes are left directly on the drawing, as in the case of this study for the Evangelist St. Matthew, which the collector attributed to Federico Zuccaro. He writes, Sketch of Zuccaro. So while this handwriting may appear to you totally generic, it is in fact by a very distinctive hand of a noted 17th century collector, Father Sebastiano Resta. And I here show you a sample of Resta's handwriting with how he wrote Zucchero. Is really very alike. The attributions are written in ink with Resta's recognizable cursive script, and the drawings are framed with his typical design that he adopted to mark his drawings in his album, meaning these 1 or 2 lines of brown ink, sometimes slightly tinted, creating these elegant windows that sometimes are lightly tinted with yellow wash. So the combination of the combined presence of this type of mounds with the inscriptions constitute the main evidence to trace the drawings now in San Francisco back to the collection of Sebastiano Resta. So who was Sebastiano Resta? You see here in a portrait, also in the Achenbach collection, ironically. The Milanese friar Sebastiano Resta was recognized by contemporaries as one of the most important collectors of artist drawings between the 17th and 18th centuries. During his lifetime, he amassed some 3,500 sheets by Italian and Northern European artists, assembled in over 70 luxurious leather-bound albums, ranging from the earliest Italian schools of the 15th century to his age. John Talman, an 18th century English agent in Italy, described Sebastiano Resta's collection as follows, I quote, "I have lately seen a collection of drawings, the finest without doubt in Europe, for the method and number of rare designs. They are books that ought to be in the Queen's Library. They were at first collected by the famous Father Resta, a Milanese of the Oratory of Filippo Neri at Rome. A person so well known in Rome and all over Italy for his skill in drawing that it would be needless to say any more of him than that these collections were made by him," unquote. In the emerging field of collecting drawings, Sebastiano Resta was not a simple collector or an amateur. He was a deeply knowledgeable and discerning one. In other words, he was a connoisseur, someone who could ultimately identify an artist's name by observing and researching a given drawing, gleaning, combining, and processing its stylistic and technical evidence all at once. An erudite, Resta added comments on his drawings about the lineage of a given artist, which school they belong, and the relationships with predecessors and followers. As a member of the congregation of San Filippo Neri, based at the Chiesa Nuova in Rome, Santa Maria della Vallicella, Resta was also someone deeply immersed in the religious as well as in the intellectual artistic milieu of Baroque Rome. His important role at the Chiesa Nuova provided Resta with access to some of the best drawings available on the market at the time, as well as with personal friendship with many of the greatest artists of the period, from Carlo Maratti to Pier Francesco Mola, Giuseppe Passeri, Giovanni Maria Morandi, and so on, whom he all helped gather artistic commissions as well as professional recognition. Resta was particularly close to the Roman Baroque painter Giuseppe Passeri, whom you see here, whom he promoted for several commissions of frescoes and painted altarpieces, both at the Chiesa Nuova and beyond. In exchange for Resta's support, Passeri likely gifted him with this large and spectacular drawing in our collection, showing Moses defending the daughter of Jethro as they're being harassed by a group of shepherds by the well. The dramatic scene is rendered by Passeri through his distinctive drawing technique with a rich and pictorial overlay of dry and wet media, which combines red chalk and a profuse spread of lead white to create the pinkish hue that is so typical of Passeri's drawings. To illustrate the act of Moses kind of swinging his stick against a group of shepherds, Passeri covered with lead white the previous drawings, the previous outlines of the stick, suggesting a sense of dynamic movement, which added drama and action to the scene. Sebastiano Resta drawing albums, and I show here the magnificent Galleria Portatile, portable gallery, still in Milan at the Ambrosiana. These albums are not just wonderful assembly of beautiful drawings, they are incredibly valuable resources for art history. Every single drawing pasted onto these albums was accompanied by Resta with erudite notes on attributions or comments clarifying the giving artist's drawing style and their relationship between master and pupils. Some of you, in fact many of you, may already be familiar with Resta's exceptional collection of Italian drawings, as one of those prize pages, album pages, featuring 2 drawings by Botticelli, was exhibited here at the Legion of Honor at our Botticelli Drawings exhibition. And this is a photo showing the album in the case. You see Resta pasted 2 separate drawings. So this is 1, and this is 2. On the blue page, he added notes about the attribution at the top and the bottom. He attributed the top to Botticelli's teacher, Fra Filippo Lippi, and the bottom to Botticelli. While in my exhibition, I think that both drawings were by Botticelli. And what I really love that he added some fine, you see, gold leaf strips on the 4 margins of the paper, so that his drawings could kind of resemble the appearance of a small frame painting. So this is why his drawing collection, his albums are called Portable Gallery. It's a gallery of drawings that you carry, around. As opposed to the kind of decorative richness that characterizes some of his drawings albums, like the one in Milan, the simple design of the surviving pages in San Francisco should be associated with a very different collecting endeavor carried out by Resta at the end of the 17th century. The drawings that he assembled for Gaspar Mendes de Haro, 7th Marquis of Del Carpio, whom you see here in the portrait. Del Carpio was an outstanding political figure who served as a Spanish ambassador to Rome from 1677 to 1683, and then from 83 he became the Viceroy of Naples until his death in 87. Del Carpio was advised and assisted in his collecting efforts by Sebastiano Resta, who sought and procured for him a vast collection of drawings in Rome and Naples. For Carpio, Resta amassed and assembled no less than 40 albums of drawings, for which the ambassador kept in Naples at his death. The few surviving whole copies of such albums, there are one in Madrid and another one in Edinburgh, show identical design elements to the sheets now in San Francisco, so thin framing lines and the attribution written at the bottom of the sheets. But also, most importantly, they are bound in red Morocco leather, the same bound that precisely described the albums when they were sold at Christie's in 1938 and acquired by Moore Achenbach. The mounts, the inscription, the leather bound, those are all clues that link our collection in San Francisco to that of the Marquis of Del Carpio assembled by Padre Resta. But there are other clues that allow us to kind of, tie the knot between our drawings and this prestigious provenance. In fact, I show you here a previously unidentified drawing, which I attribute to the Roman Baroque artist Ludovico Gimignani, which illustrates a mythological scene of Virgil kind of urging Mercury urging Aeneas to depart from Carthage. At lower left, the winged allegory of fame is embracing another allegorical figure, which is carving a large sculpted coat of arms. Well, this coat of arms is exactly that of Del Carpio, you can see here, And in fact, I believe that our large drawing was possibly meant as a frontispiece to one of the drawing albums assembled by Resta for his patron. At Del Carpio's death in Naples in 1687, all of his belongings, all of his art collection was shipped to Madrid, where it was ultimately auctioned off. But we know that several of these drawings albums, there were 40, kind of escaped the shipment and were kind of floating in Naples, where it is very likely that were acquired by Joseph Cogswell at the beginning of the 19th century, and then eventually acquired by Moore Achenbach. So the nature of our drawing collection in San Francisco reflects the taste and collective interests of Sebastiano Resta, as well as the places where he sourced the primary material. Resta got the vast majority of his drawings in Rome and then put together the remaining ones in Naples. So our drawings specifically reflect these two drawing schools, which we're going to see now in detail. Let's start with Rome, a place where Resta resided and where he gathered the most material. The collection has a very good representation of draftsmen active in Rome from 1527, the watershed here of the traumatic sack of Rome, which dispersed many of the artists that were working there throughout Italy. Elected in 1534 as the first Roman pope in over a century, Paul III, from the Farnese family, sought to reestablish the centrality of the Eternal City as well as his political legitimacy of the papal power by reconnecting the church, the present of the church, with the past glory of imperial Rome. In the city, he promoted many architectural renovation, but I would say that the spectacular refurbishment of Castel Sant'Angelo, which once was the mausoleum of Emperor Hadrian, is possibly the most striking in Paul III's clear ambition to recreate the feel and appearance of a patrician residence from imperial Rome. You can see here the beautiful library hall, which is, you really should go to see Castel Sant'Angelo. It's a magnificent assembly of stucco decorations and frescoes and architectural elements, and they have a beautiful art collection as well. So for this endeavor, the Pope entrusted a team of artists, two workshops in particular. One was led by Lucio Luzzi, who was responsible for the stunning decoration all'antica, antique style, of several rooms of the castle, including this library. And have a look at the beautiful sequence of stucco lunette, all showing scenes from the Roman sacrifices, for which in San Francisco we have one of the drawings. It's a preparatory study for one of such lunettes to be realized in stucco, showing two Roman soldiers over an altar. And it shows really the amazing Luzio's accuracy of design, when even the smallest decorative components of the decoration of the palace were, kind of prepared and designed with a drawing. This pen and ink drawing is reflective of Luzio's influence from the school of Raphael, especially in the classicizing, style and the lightness of touch of the pen and ink, which really barely touches the paper. It's gorgeous. Paul III majestic honorary hall, the Sala Paolina, so after his name, at Castel Sant'Angelo, was also decorated in fresco by a team of assistants headed by the second artist, Perino del Vaga, whom we mentioned before, one of Raphael's most talented pupils in Rome. Perino relied extensively on the use of drawing, both to envision the spectacular sequence of fresco scenes. This one shows the history of Alexander the Great. Paul III's name was Alessandro Farnese, so they show moments from ancient history recalling his name. And so Perino used drawing both to envision the beautiful scenes to be frescoed, but also to control and manage the execution of it by the very large team of workshop assistants responsible for painting the scenes upon his designs. So sometimes the draftsman was really only let's say the head of the workshop was executing the drawings, and then the frescoes were, entrusted to the pupil's execution. Oh my God, again. Thank you, Rich. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. So, two drawings in San Francisco can be connected to this very, very, very important decoration endeavor. This couple of seated nudes, which I believe relate to the, of course, to the nudes that are flanking the scenes from Alexander's history. This is the cutting of the Gordian knot. And these are two allegorical nudes, or just decorative nudes, which were prepared through these two drawings in San Francisco. I would tentatively attribute them not to Perino del Vaga himself, as they lack some sort of anatomical understanding. You can see they're a little flaccid, and that the anatomy is not as well defined as Perino would do in his drawings. But I'm pretty confident that they are by his very talented pupil from Bologna, Pellegrino Tibaldi. They are drawn with Tibaldi's really typical and dynamic pen and ink style, with looping lines and a very expressive use of washes that characterize other drawings executed for this endeavor. So following these and a number of others reattributions, some recent acquisitions have attempted to strengthen our holdings of drawings by the Roman School of Raphael, which is by far the most influential artistic workshop in Renaissance Italy. In 2023, we were successful in acquiring at auction in London this dynamic study for a descent from the cross. The composition that you can see here at left shows the dead body of Christ being removed from the cross by a team of 5 men, while the body is being, of course, mourned at the bottom by the Virgin Mary and the 3 Marys. The expressive drawing style, where brown ink and lead white are reinforced and corrected with forceful strokes of red chalk, is reflective of Raphael's later Roman drawing style, 1515-1520, and the drawing was possibly executed under his direct supervision and direction. I argued that this drawing was in fact drawn by Ugo da Carpi, one of Raphael's pupils and his favorite woodcut designer, as it directly relates to one of his celebrated chiaroscuro woodcut prints. And I showed the print at right, a recent gift from Kirk Edward Long, whom we thank for the generous donation of his amazing print collection. The comparison between the drawing and the print shows significant affinities in scale of the figure, as well as important variation to the design. You notice that, for example, the central figure that supports the body of Christ at center in the drawing was kind of, eliminated in the final printed design, which means that the drawing is not a copy of the print, but was preparatory for it. The rich overlay of material on the drawing, again with abundant passages of washes and lead white, anticipates the contrast tones achieved by Ugo da Carpi in his chiaroscuro print. Another architectural endeavor of high symbolic value, began with the Farnese Pope and kind of continued through the years, was the redesign of the Piazza del Campidoglio, the Capitol, which houses Rome administrative power. In the largest room of the Conservator's Palace, the majestic palace for the Conservators of Rome, Giuseppe Cesari, known as Cavaliere d'Arpino, unfolded the mythical origins of the city on a vast fresco cycle which took him about 30 years to complete. in truth, Cesare willingly delayed the completion of the frescoes, as he cleverly included in his contract with the city of Rome that he could establish his own workshop and residence in the palace until the frescoes were finished. So he kind of dragged the work for 30 years so he could have the beautiful view from the Capitol. Very smart guy. Related to this important commission is our beautiful drawing in San Francisco, highly finished study featuring a man with a spade. The drawing, you can see, relates to the figure in the background of the monumental scene with Romulus tracing the furrow of Rome. And this figure is one of those men that kind of breaks the ground as Rome is being built for the first time. It is capturing this beautiful ballet-like pose and drawn in black chalk with additional color chalks. So what makes this drawing very interesting and important in the evolution of drawings in the Renaissance is the use of color. It's not a pen and ink drawing, it's not just black chalk, but Arpino added pink chalk and red chalk to kind of infuse his drawings and the figure with the flesh tones and a higher sense of naturalism. So for this reason, this drawing was included in the early section of our exhibition Color into Line in 2021. In the kind of a natural and overly affected pose of the figure, entirely relying on the elegance of the body, let's say emphasis on style, this drawing also attests to the limits of Arpino and his draftsmanship at the beginning of the 17th century. By the time Cesare completed his fresco, the Roman art scene had been taken by storm by three artists from Bologna, whose revolutionary approach to drawing left a lasting legacy in the city. Seeking an alternative to the artifice of the Mannerist style promoted in Florence and Rome, Agostino, Annibale, and Ludovico Carracci drew strongly from lesser-known regional styles and centered their practice around life drawing. For their talent as draftsmen, the Carracci were the emblem of the artistic resurgence in the 17th century, according to Sebastiano Resta, who really put the three Carracci as the pinnacle of art of his age. Several drawings in San Francisco bear attributions to the Carracci left by Sebastiano Resta, but only a few can sustain, in fact, such claims, including this beautiful and gripping figure study for a draped man drawn by Agostino Carracci, which truly stands out for its sensitive treatment of the natural red chalk, which endows great softness to the drapery study. Our museums did lack, however, a significant drawing by Annibale Carracci, the central figure in Bolognese painting, and the most brilliant member of the family. So, a few years ago, we acquired this impressive nude study by Annibale, depicting a youth recycling on a bank, crowned with leaves like a young river god. This drawing is striking for its large size, the anatomical accuracy, and the daring natural pose of the youthful sitter. It is one of a very limited group of surviving life drawings executed in Bologna by the young Annibale Carracci in the mid-1580s, and it is a testament to the young artist's meticulous observation of the human body and expressive command of the red chalk medium. Possibly because most of the drawings were gathered by Sebastiano Resta in Naples and were destined to the collection of the city's viceroy, the Achenbach holds an outstanding group of drawings by Neapolitan artists or artists working in Naples. This group is particularly important given the rarity of some of the artists featured. Unlike Rome or Florence, which had a long and layered artistic tradition when it came to great draftsmen, from Raphael, Michelangelo, the Carracci, Naples could not claim such lineage. In the 16th century, in fact, most artists employed in the city were sourced from Florence, like Giovanni Balducci, whom you see here, a choice that clearly delayed the development of a local drawing school. As argued recently by Mauro Vincenzo Fontana, this study by Balducci may have been preparatory for the lost decoration of the dome of the Cathedral of the Assunta in Naples, a very, very important church. While the original dome was destroyed during the war and rebuilt, and there's a modern structure built in the 70s, a few contemporary sources mention Balducci's frescoes decoration as populated, I quote, by a choir of singing angels with musical instruments, entirely similar to the drawing, to the figures featured in our drawing here. Also, you can notice the framing lines around the figures. There's a polygonal shape that's slightly narrowing at the top, which may indicate that, in fact, the drawing was intended as a design for a kind of narrowing dome. Balducci's Florentiness, is evident here in the elegance of his composition and in the neat penwork of his drawing. As opposed to the Florentines' linear style, the earliest Neapolitan draftsmen adopted a characteristic pictorial style to their drawings, often employing very expressive brush strokes and abundant use of washes. Belisario Corenzio, whom you see here, was a Greek artist who moved to Naples and resided there until the 1640s. And he is commonly considered the first draftsman to emerge locally from the city. In his drawings, as in this one, Corenzio adopted a pictorial technique which involved expressive brush strokes and washes and highlights to render the stark lighting contrast of his compositional studies. Almost always, these are religious scenes to be frescoes at the local certosa or for local churches in Florence. Carlo Coppola, one of Corenzio's pupils, followed his teacher's technique, similarly employing forceful brush strokes to his drawings. This composition study depicts the dramatic martyrdom of Saint Lawrence, who was and still is the subject of a very heartfelt devotion in Naples. The Roman biographer Giovanni Battista Passeri wrote, I quote, "The Neapolitans, as opposed to the Romans or Florentines, are not as keen by custom to drawing." The Neapolitan painter Luca Giordano, by whom I showed a splendid Magdalene acquired by Emily for the Legion of Honor and on view upstairs, Luca Giordano notably said, I quote, "Anyone with some practice can draw well, but not everybody can paint well. And I'm quite proud to be Luca Giordano as opposed to all the draftsmen in the world," unquote. So very modest Giordano, who was, however, a very prolific draftsman, very good draftsman and gifted one, as several drawings in our collection can attest. In fact, I would say that Emily's acquisition kind of prompted me to go through our holdings, and as we have several attributions to Giordano, and this one, I think it's quite correct, this drawing with Samson and Delilah. Let's see, it doesn't go, next slide. Yes, thank you. Relates to a drawing of almost the same subject at the Louvre. Giordano's kind of succinct pen style with raw, thin outlines or his rough sketches in red chalk attests to his purely functional approach to draftsmanship. His drawings do not leave room for any technical virtuosity or indulgence or stylistic indulgence. They're very, very practical to the definition of the scene. Giordano, in fact, was a painter deeply influenced by the example of Caravaggio, by whom, notoriously, we have no surviving drawing, nor a firmly attributed one. So, favoring a more direct pictorial approach to the canvas, These artists, and many Neapolitan artists, seemingly did not require nor involve the use of drawings in the preparation of their paintings. The influence of Caravaggio is another key element that delayed the spread of a native drawing style in Naples. The most transformative and lasting impact on the development of Neapolitan drawing, of a tradition in Naples, of a drawing tradition, occurred in 1616 with the arrival in Naples from Rome of the Spanish painter Giuseppe de Ribera. A prolific, technically accomplished, and highly inventive draftsman, Ribera stands out as the most important graphic artist in the Neapolitan Seicento. The Achenbach collection treasures a record number of 9 drawings by the artist, attesting to his use of the medium in every step of the design process and for all sorts of purposes. In preparation of his dramatic paintings, as you can see here, often depicting highly violent scenes of martyrdom or devotional paintings. Drawings were also used in the preparation of his inventive and highly popular etchings. Ribera is really the great printmaker of the Neapolitan Seicento and some sort of a medium that helped to popularize his painting invention in Naples and throughout Italy and Europe. He used Ribera introduced in Naples an entirely new genre of drawings, including academic and anatomical studies, and used drawings as a primary and highly creative form of expression. As the head of a large artistic workshop, he also influenced an entire generation of local artists and draftsmen, including Agnello Falcone, Micco Spadaro, Giordano, of course, all of whom imitated his dry and pungent pen and ink technique. So I want to conclude today's talk with Genoa, which is, in fact, the emerging drawing school in the 17th century. Genoa became a republic by the mid of the 16th century, led by a wealthy aristocracy who kind of promoted a constant renovation, architectural and decorative renovation of the city, which really prompted the development and the birth of a local artistic tradition. So many of the draftsmen and painters active in Genoa between the 16th and the 17th century formed their style upon that of Luca Cambiaso, a pupil of Perino del Vaga. So you understand how important Perino was for development of local traditions throughout Italy, and the caposcuola, the headmaster of the Genoese school. Cambiaso's distinct drawing style, where blocky forms are rendered with hard and assured outlines in pen and ink, inspired more of a century of draftsmen in the city, starting with his own pupils, Lazzaro Tavarone, Benso, Piola, and Giovanni Battista Paggi, by whom I show you this drawing, which was also the image of today's talk, which is very much exemplary of Cambiaso's drawing style, as the artist quickly outlined the scene in pen and ink and adjusted the lights with brush and brown wash. This drawing was traditionally catalog identified as Christ offering his sudarium, so his face on the shroud, but it shows instead a different and more specific scene, an apocryphal episode where Jesus offers a cloth with the impression of his face to a royal painter of the Armenian king Abgar V, known as being one of the first Christian kings in the Middle East. This is an episode very popular in the Byzantine world especially, but rarely depicted in Italian art. And to the right, you see an icon where basically the painter gives the image of the head of Christ with the face of Christ to the king. How did I came to this identification? By looking at the back of this drawing, which on the back has a really tiny inscription, I would say 18th century, that identifies the iconography of this drawing, and then he says, go to the church of San Bartolomeo degli Armeni in Genoa, where the resulting painting is still there. And so I sent my aunt, who lives in Genoa, and promptly went there, and voila, she found the painting, which is very exciting. And she told me that there is attributed to Gregorio de Ferrari. So the attribution really to Paggi got completely lost over time. So it's interesting how through a drawing, sometimes you can really recover early attributions and authorships, in fact. This is a very important church in Genoa. Again, if you go to Italy, go to Genoa, is amazing. And the Church of the Armeni as one of the few surviving relics of the Mandylion, the face of Christ on the shroud. The very, very famous and long one is in Turin, but Genoa is the second one. So clearly there was an iconography that was very meaningful to the scope of this church who held this beautiful relic. We have many other drawings and we have many other schools, but I'm skipping the Venetian one for a reason, because in January we are going to exhibit a selection of our best Venetian drawings, including the beautiful Piazzetta recently acquired through the generous gift of Roger Thomas and Arthur Libera in honor of Denise Hale, but also we have our amazing Tiepolos and some early 16th century drawings. So come back in January to discover the really wealth and scope of our Italian drawings collection. And thank you so much for being here today. Thank you. So if you have survived, I can take one question, or I'm here if you want to ask me questions. I'm always available, but thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming today. Thank you.